You didn't wake up one day and decide to pull away from people. It just happened. Suddenly, conversations felt heavier. Social gatherings felt draining. Even people you once loved deeply started to feel distant. Not because they changed. Because you did, and you couldn't explain why. Dolores Cannon spoke about this moment in A Soul's Journey. She said there comes a phase where consciousness begins to outgrow its surroundings. Not in arrogance, not in judgment. In frequency. You may have noticed. You don't enjoy small talk anymore. Drama exhausts you. You feel tired after socializing. You prefer silence over noise, not because you hate people, but because your soul is recalibrating. Dolores explained that when a soul begins shifting into a higher awareness, old energetic connections start to loosen. The bonds that once felt natural suddenly feel forced. You still care. You're still kind, but you're no longer attached the same way. This is confusing, because you might think, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel cold? Why don't I miss people like before? Nothing is wrong. Your soul is changing its operating system. You're no longer driven by approval, belonging, validation. You're guided by alignment. That's why some people suddenly feel too loud, too negative, too shallow, too draining. It's not that they became worse. You just became different. Dolores Cannon said this detachment is a sign of inner awakening. A soul that is shifting stops feeding energy into connections that no longer resonate. And here's the key. This detachment feels lonely, but it's not isolation. It's transition. You're standing between two versions of yourself. The old you, who needed people. The new you, who feels whole alone. This phase is uncomfortable because your identity was built around relationships. Who you were to others. How you showed up, what you gave. Now, something inside you is pulling back, not to disappear, to remember who you are without the noise. Dar said this stage is necessary. Before a soul upgrades, it must unplug from old dynamics, old patterns, old emotional contracts, and that's why you feel distant. Not because you don't love people, but because your soul is shifting timelines. And when timelines change, not everyone comes with you. That doesn't make you heartless. It makes you awake. And this is only the beginning. Have you noticed something strange? People you once connected with effortlessly now feel exhausting. The conversations repeat. The energy feels dense. You leave feeling drained instead of uplifted. Dolores Cannon explained this happens when a soul outgrows its frequency environment. It's like trying to listen to an old radio station when your soul has already tuned into a new one. The signal doesn't match anymore. That doesn't mean those people are bad. It doesn't mean you're better. It means you're vibrating differently. Dolores said, every relationship is an energetic agreement. You meet people who match the version of you at that time. But when you evolve, those agreements expire. You may feel guilt about this. Why don't I feel close anymore? Why do I want space? Am I becoming selfish? No. You're becoming honest. Your soul no longer pretends. It no longer forces connection. It no longer sacrifices peace just to avoid hurting others. That's growth. You may notice you're drawn to solitude, nature, spiritual content, deeper conversations. Your nervous system is seeking clean energy. Dolores Cannon said this stage is called energetic detox. The soul begins releasing old attachments that kept it small. That's why you might stop replying as much, cancel plans, avoid crowded places, crave silence. Not from depression, from clarity. You're realizing not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not every bond is meant to last forever. Some people are chapters, not the whole story. And this is the hardest truth to accept. Because the ego says, hold on, don't change, stay who you were. But the soul says, grow, move forward, release what no longer fits. Dolores Cannon taught that detachment is not coldness. It's self-respect. You are finally choosing peace over people-pleasing, alignment over approval, truth over comfort, and that shift will naturally change who stays in your life. You're not losing people. You're outgrowing frequencies. And this is exactly what happens right before a soul ascends into its next phase. There was a time when you cared deeply about what people thought. You measured yourself through their reactions, their approval, their attention. But lately, something changed. You still care, but not desperately. You don't chase replies. You don't explain yourself. You don't need to be understood. Dolores Cannon described this as the moment the soul detaches from external mirrors. Because you've started to see yourself clearly, you no longer need constant reassurance, compliments, likes, approval, your worth. Stop depending on others. That's not arrogance. That's self-remembrance. When the soul shifts, it stops outsourcing identity. You stop asking, am I good enough? Do they like me? Did I say the wrong thing? You trust yourself. And that quiet confidence makes people uncomfortable. Not because you're rude, but because you're unhooked. You no longer react to gossip, manipulation, emotional games, soul control. You see it, and you step back. Dolores said awakened souls stop feeding toxic dynamics. They don't fight them. They starve them by not participating. This is why some people think you've changed. You did. You stopped performing. You stopped shrinking. You stopped overgiving. You stopped explaining. You began choosing your peace, your time, your energy, and here's the part most don't understand. When you stop seeking validation, some people lose interest because they were feeding on your attention, not your presence. Dolores Cannon taught that soul shifting often exposes hidden dynamics. Who truly cared and who just needed you? This can feel painful, but it's also liberating because now you see clearly. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't try to prove yourself. You simply exist, and the people meant to stay will feel your shift and rise with you. The rest will naturally drift away, not in anger, in completion. This is what happens when the soul reclaims its power. You stop needing approval because you finally approve of yourself. Here's something nobody warns you about. When your soul shifts, you feel lonely, not because you're alone, but because you're between worlds. The old version of you doesn't exist anymore, but the new version is still forming. So you stand in the middle, disconnected, confused, quiet. Dolores Cannon said this stage is unavoidable. It's the void between identities, where the ego dissolves and the soul takes control. This loneliness feels different. It's not sadness. It's not depression. It's detachment. You're no longer emotionally hooked into the world the same way. Things that once excited you feel dull. People who once energized you now drain you. And you wonder, why do I feel so empty? You're not empty. You're clearing space. Dolores taught that before a soul upgrades, it releases old attachments, and releasing feels like loss. Even when it's healthy, you may miss people who no longer resonate, not because you want them back, but because they represent a version of you that's gone. This is grief, not for them, for who you used to be, and grief is part of evolution. You're shedding layers, beliefs, roles, masks, so of course you feel exposed, vulnerable, quiet. But here's the truth. This loneliness is sacred. It's the silence before clarity, the pause before direction. Dolores Cannon said awakened souls must spend time alone, not to isolate, but to hear themselves again. Your soul has been whispering for years. Now that the noise is gone, you can finally listen. This phase won't last forever. Soon, you'll meet people who match your new frequency. Conversations will feel alive again. Connections will feel natural again. But for now, this solitude is a classroom, teaching you self-trust, emotional independence, inner peace. You're learning how to stand alone, so you never settle again. And when this phase ends, you won't be desperate for connection. You'll choose it from wholeness, not need. This loneliness is not punishment. It's preparation for the life your soul is creating next. Have you noticed how certain people just vanish? No big argument, no dramatic ending. They simply drift away, and strangely, you don't chase them. You feel a quiet acceptance. Dolores Cannon said this happens when soul contracts expire. Every relationship has a purpose. Some teach, some heal, some trigger growth, but none are meant to last forever. When the lesson is complete, the connection dissolves. You're not being abandoned. You're being released. This is why it feels different this time. Before, you would have fought to keep people. Over-explained, over-given, over-sacrificed. Now, you let go. Not from bitterness, from understanding. Dolores taught that awakened souls no longer cling to expired energy. They trust timing. You've started noticing. Certain names stop appearing, old friendships fade. People stop reaching out, and instead of pain, you feel peace. That's growth. You're no longer afraid of endings. Because endings create space. Space for aligned people, deeper connections, higher frequency bonds. Your soul is curating your environment, removing what no longer matches. This is also why you might feel lighter lately. Even though people are leaving, your energy feels clearer. That's because energetic cords are dissolving. Old expectations, old obligations, old emotional debts. You are no longer responsible for carrying everyone. Dolores Cannon said this is a sign of spiritual maturity. You finally understand. You don't have to hold on to what hurts. You don't have to stay where you're misunderstood. You don't have to shrink to keep others comfortable. You are allowed to evolve. And evolution changes who stays. Some people can't follow you into this new frequency, not because they're bad, but because they're not ready. And that's okay. Everyone awakens in their own time. You don't need to drag anyone. You're not here to save. You're here to be. And when you stop forcing connections, the right ones find you effortlessly. This is divine filtering, not loss, alignment. Something subtle is happening inside you. You're reacting less. Things that once triggered you now barely touch you. Criticism doesn't sting like before. Arguments don't pull you in. Other people's moods no longer control yours. Dolores Cannon said this is one of the clearest signs of a soul shift. You're no longer emotionally entangled, not cold, not numb, just free. You've learned the difference between compassion and attachment. You care, but you don't carry. You listen, but you don't absorb. This is powerful, because for the first time, your energy is yours. You may have noticed, you don't explain yourself. You don't argue your truth. You don't defend your choices. You simply live them. Dolores taught that awakened souls stop seeking agreement. They no longer need others to validate their reality. You don't need to convince anyone anymore. Your peace is enough. And that scares some people, because when you stop reacting, manipulation stops working. Guilt stops working. Drama stops working. Control stops working. So some people will try harder. They'll test you. They'll provoke. But you won't bite. Not because you don't care, but because you've outgrown conflict. This emotional freedom feels strange at first. You may wonder, why don't I feel upset? Why don't I care like before? Am I becoming heartless? No, you're becoming conscious. Dolores Cannon explained that old souls learn to observe emotions instead of drowning in them. You feel, but you don't spiral. You acknowledge, but you don't attach. That's mastery. This is why your inner world feels calmer. Even when life is chaotic. Even when people are dramatic, you stay centered. because your soul is now leading, not your wounds. And when the soul leads, peace becomes natural, not forced, not practiced, just normal. You're no longer controlled by other people's storms. You've found your own sky. And once you taste this freedom, you will never go back. Because now, detachment is not loss. It's liberation. Have you noticed something else changing? The type of people around you. Suddenly, you're meeting souls who feel familiar. Conversations go deeper. Silence feels comfortable. You don't have to pretend. Dolores Cannon said when a soul shifts frequency, reality reorganizes around it. You don't chase new people. They appear, at the perfect time, in unexpected ways. Because energy attracts energy. Your vibration changed, so your environment followed. This is why shallow connections are disappearing, and meaningful ones are forming naturally. You may meet someone and feel instant recognition. Not attraction, not excitement, but knowing. As if you've met before. That's soul memory. Dolores explained that awakened souls often reconnect across lifetimes. When frequency aligns, timelines intersect again. This is why conversations feel effortless. You feel seen instantly. You don't need to explain yourself. You're finally speaking your soul's language. And this is why you no longer force friendships. You trust timing. If someone stays, they resonate. If they leave, they don't. No resentment. No drama, just alignment. You're learning that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. And that's not arrogance. That's sacred boundaries. Your energy is becoming refined. You feel it. Crowds drain you. Noise overwhelms you. You crave calm spaces because your soul has changed atmospheres. It can no longer survive in chaos. Dolores Cannon said this is what happens when consciousness expands. You outgrow surface relationships, emotional games, meaningless connections, and you start attracting depth, authenticity. Peace. Your world is upgrading, and so are your relationships. You're not becoming distant. You're becoming selective. Not everyone is meant to walk with you now. Some were only meant to walk you to this point, and that's okay. Gratitude replaces attachment. You honor the past, but you don't live in it. Because your soul is walking forward, and forward is where your true people are, waiting, recognizing you. The moment you arrive. One day, you'll look back at this period of detachment, and you'll understand. This wasn't isolation. It was initiation. Dolores Cannon said every awakened soul goes through a phase where it pulls back from the world. Not to disappear, but to realign. You were never meant to carry everyone. You were never meant to stay the same. Growth requires space, and space requires distance. That's why you felt called to step back, not from love, but from misalignment. You weren't running away. You were returning to yourself. This phase teaches you something powerful, that your worth doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being true. You no longer measure your life by who stays, but by how peaceful you feel. You've learned to enjoy your own company, to trust your intuition, to choose silence over noise, and that changes everything. Dolores Cannon taught that once a soul integrates this lesson, life opens up again. But this time, you choose differently. You don't tolerate disrespect. You don't chase affection. You don't settle for shallow connections. You move slowly, intentionally, with awareness. You've become sovereign. And sovereignty feels lonely at first, because you can't be controlled anymore. You can't be guilted. You can't be manipulated. You see too clearly now. That's why some people no longer feel comfortable around you. Your presence reflects truth, and not everyone wants to face themselves. But you don't judge. You understand. Everyone is at a different stage, and you respect their journey without sacrificing your own. This detachment phase will not last forever. Soon, you'll find your people. Not many, but real. Souls who speak your language, who honor your boundaries, who grow with you. And when you meet them, you'll realize why you had to let go of so many. Your soul wasn't emptying your life. It was making space for peace, for truth, for aligned love. So if you feel detached right now, don't panic. You're not losing yourself. You're finding yourself. And once you do, nothing will ever feel forced again. Not love, not friendship, not life. Everything will flow the way it was always meant to.